What if the moment you stop chasing her is the exact moment she starts thinking about you the most? Silence is often misunderstood. People think it means absence, disinterest, or weakness. But in reality, silence, when it comes from a place of strength, does something powerful. It creates curiosity. It builds emotional tension. It pulls attention in a way that constant noise never can. When you're always available, always responding instantly, always explaining yourself, there's nothing left to wonder about. Everything is predictable, and predictability over time kills intrigue. But silence interrupts that pattern. It creates a gap, and in that gap, the mind starts to search for answers. That's where curiosity is born. When you don't immediately reply, when you don't chase every interaction, when you allow moments of stillness instead of filling every second with words, her mind begins to lean in. She starts asking herself questions. Why is he quiet? What is he thinking? Why doesn't he react like everyone else? And those questions don't push her away. They pull her deeper, because human nature is wired to seek closure. When something feels incomplete, we don't ignore it, we focus on it even more. Silence creates that sense of incompleteness. It leaves space for imagination, and imagination is always more powerful than reality because it fills in the blanks with emotion. Now, that curiosity turns into emotional tension. It's subtle at first, a small feeling that something is different about you. You're not over-explaining, you're not over-pursuing, you're not trying to control the outcome. And that calm, grounded silence, it creates a kind of pressure, not forced but felt. She starts becoming more aware of your presence, even when you're not saying anything. That's emotional tension. It's the space between what is said and what is felt. It's the pause between messages. The unspoken energy in a conversation. The feeling that there's more beneath the surface, but it's not being given away so easily. And that tension, it's what makes interactions meaningful. Because when everything is given instantly, it loses value. But when something has to be felt, discovered, and understood over time, it becomes more significant. Silence forces that process. It slows things down. It makes every word, every action, every moment carry more weight. But this kind of silence only works when it comes from confidence. If silence is used out of fear, insecurity, or as a tactic to manipulate, it feels empty. People can sense that. But when it comes from a place of self-control, when you're genuinely focused on your own life, your own purpose, your own peace, then your silence speaks louder than words ever could. It says you're not desperate. It says you're not trying to prove anything. It says you're comfortable with or without attention. And that energy is rare. So instead of chasing, instead of over-talking, instead of trying to fill every moment, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back. Let there be space. Let there be silence. Because in that silence, curiosity grows. And in that curiosity, emotional tension begins to build naturally. Scarcity is one of the most powerful forces behind attraction, yet most people completely misunderstand it. They think value comes from doing more, giving more, being more available. But the truth is the opposite. What's always available is rarely appreciated, and what's limited naturally becomes more desirable. When something is easy to access, the mind doesn't assign much importance to it. There's no challenge, no anticipation, no sense of effort required. But when something becomes scarce, when it's not constantly within reach, it immediately feels more valuable. Not because it changed, but because access to it did. The same principle applies to your time, your attention, your energy. If you're always there, always replying instantly, always adjusting your schedule just to be available, you unintentionally lower your perceived value. Not because you're not worthy, but because there's no sense of limitation. There's no reason for someone to wonder, to wait, or to invest. But the moment your presence becomes selective, everything shifts. When you're not always available, when your attention isn't given out freely, when your time has boundaries, it creates a subtle realization. She starts to feel that your presence is something that has to be earned, not assumed. And that changes how she values it. Because people respect what they have to work for, scarcity introduces effort. And effort creates emotional investment. When someone has to think about you, wait for you, or adjust to your pace, they begin to value the connection more deeply. It's no longer something casual, it becomes something meaningful. And here's where it gets deeper. Scarcity doesn't mean disappearing or playing games. It means having a full life that doesn't revolve around one person. It means your time is occupied by purpose, goals, growth, and self-respect. So when you give your attention, it's intentional, not automatic. That kind of presence feels different. It feels real. Because now, instead of being just another option, you become someone whose attention actually matters. When you speak, it carries weight. When you show up, it feels significant. When you give your time, it feels chosen, not given out of habit. And that's where perceived value increases. She begins to notice the difference. She feels that you're not trying to win her over at all costs. You're not bending yourself just to stay relevant, and instead of pushing her away, it creates a quiet respect. Because deep down, people are drawn to those who value themselves. When you treat your time like it matters, others start to treat it the same way. When you don't overextend yourself, you signal that your energy is limited and therefore valuable. And when your presence isn't guaranteed, it becomes something people don't want to lose. That's the power of scarcity. It shifts the dynamic without force. It builds attraction without words. It creates desire without chasing. Because in a world where everyone is constantly available, constantly trying to be seen, constantly over, giving the person who knows when to step back, when to hold their space, and when to give selectively, that person stands out, not by doing more, but by understanding that less, when it's real, intentional, and grounded, is often far more powerful. Emotional independence is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. People often confuse it with detachment, coldness, or not caring at all. But true emotional independence isn't about shutting down your feelings, it's about not being controlled by them. It's about feeling deeply without losing yourself in the process. And when you reach that state, something powerful happens. The entire dynamic between you and her begins to shift, because most interactions are built on subtle emotional dependence. One person starts needing more attention, more validation, more reassurance. They begin to rely on the other person for their sense of worth, their mood, their emotional stability. And the moment that happens, the balance changes. The one who needs less naturally holds more power, not power in a manipulative sense, but in presence, in control, in stability. When you're emotionally independent, you don't chase validation. You don't panic when there's silence. You don't overthink every small change in behavior. You remain grounded, regardless of what's happening externally. And that kind of energy is rare because most people are reacting, seeking, and depending. She notices that difference immediately. At first, it feels unfamiliar. She may test it without even realizing, pulling back slightly, changing her energy, seeing how you respond. Most people react instantly. They try harder, give more, chase more. But when you don't, when you stay centered and unaffected, it creates a shift she can feel. Because now, you're not operating from need. You're operating from choice. And that changes everything. When you choose to give attention instead of needing to give it, it feels different. When you choose to stay instead of fearing being alone, it feels stronger. When your emotions are steady instead of reactive, it creates a sense of calm that naturally draws people in. That's the shift in power. She begins to feel that your emotional state isn't dependent on her actions. She can't easily influence your mood, your focus, or your direction. And instead of making her feel disconnected, it creates a deeper level of respect. Because stability is attractive. Most people are used to emotional highs and lows, intensity followed by uncertainty, attention followed by withdrawal. But emotional independence removes that chaos. It creates consistency. And in that consistency, there's a quiet confidence that speaks louder than words. You're not trying to control the situation. You're in control of yourself, and that's what shifts the dynamic. Now, instead of you adjusting to her behavior, she becomes more aware of yours. Instead of you seeking reassurance, she starts seeking your attention. Not because you forced it, but because your energy isn't easily moved. And here's the deeper truth. When you're emotionally independent, you're not afraid of losing anyone. Not because you don't care, but because you understand your own value. You know that your peace, your purpose, and your self-respect come first. So you don't hold on too tightly. You don't try to force connections to stay. You allow things to flow naturally. And that freedom is what creates real attraction. Because when someone feels that you're with them by choice, not by need, it changes how they see you. It removes pressure, but increases value. It creates space, but deepens connection. That's the power of emotional independence. It doesn't just protect your peace. It transforms the entire dynamic, quietly, naturally, and without effort. Mystery is one of the most underrated forces in attraction. In a world where everyone shares everything, explains everything, and reveals everything too quickly, the person who holds a little back becomes unforgettable. Not because they're hiding something, but because they understand the power of not being fully known all at once. When everything about you is immediately visible, your thoughts, your plans, your emotions, there's nothing left to discover. And without discovery, attraction slowly fades. Because attraction isn't just about what's seen, it's about what's felt but not fully understood. That's where mystery comes in. Mystery creates depth. It gives the other person something to explore, something to think about, something to come back to even when you're not around. When you don't reveal everything instantly, you allow curiosity to grow naturally. And curiosity is what keeps someone mentally and emotionally engaged. When she can't fully figure you out, she leans in, not out of confusion, but out of interest. She starts paying closer attention to your words, your actions, your energy. She begins to notice the small things, how you respond when you speak, what you choose to share, and what you don't. And in that process, she becomes more invested. Because now, she's not just experiencing you, she's trying to understand you. And that creates attraction on a deeper level. Mystery also signals confidence. It shows that you don't feel the need to constantly explain yourself or prove your worth. You're comfortable being known over time, not all at once. You're okay with silence. You're okay with not rushing to fill every gap with information. That calm restraint, it speaks volumes. Because most people overcompensate. They talk too much, reveal too much, try too hard to be understood immediately. But when you slow things down, when you allow layers to unfold naturally, it creates a different kind of connection, one that feels earned, not given. And people value what they earn. Mystery also keeps emotions alive. When everything is predictable, emotions become flat. But when there's a sense of the unknown, even in small ways, it creates a subtle tension. A feeling that there's always more to discover, more to experience, more to understand. That feeling keeps the connection exciting. But real mystery isn't about playing games or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about depth. It's about having a life, thoughts, and experiences that aren't all displayed at once. It's about being present without being overly exposed. It's the difference between being open and being instantly available. When you share things gradually, when you let someone earn access to your deeper layers, it creates a natural progression. Each conversation feels meaningful. Each moment reveals something new. And instead of everything happening at once, the connection builds over time. That's what makes it lasting. Because when attraction is built slowly, through curiosity and discovery, it becomes stronger. It's not based on surface level impressions, it's built on layers, depth, and emotional engagement. And that's what mystery does. It transforms simple interactions into something meaningful. It turns presence into intrigue. It makes someone think about you, not because you said everything, but because you didn't. Self-respect is quiet, but it speaks louder than anything you could ever say. It doesn't beg for attention, it doesn't demand validation, and it doesn't try to prove its worth. Yet somehow, it naturally commands attention because it sets a standard that others can feel, even if you never explain it. Most people think attention comes from doing more, talking more, giving more, chasing more. But real attention isn't forced, it's drawn, and nothing draws it stronger than someone who genuinely respects themselves. When you have self-respect, your behavior changes without effort. You don't tolerate disrespect just to keep someone around. You don't overextend yourself just to be liked. You don't shrink your standards just to fit into someone else's expectations. And that energy creates a presence that stands out immediately, because it's rare. She notices it in the way you carry yourself, in the way you speak calm, not rushed, in the way you respond intentional, not reactive, in the way you walk away from anything that disturbs your peace without creating drama or needing closure. That's what commands attention, not loudness, not arrogance, not trying to dominate a situation, but a quiet certainty in who you are and what you will or won't accept. When you respect yourself, you send a clear message without words. Your time matters, your energy matters, and your presence is not something to be taken lightly. And people respond to that, not because you ask them to, but because your actions make it clear. Self-respect also creates boundaries. And boundaries are often misunderstood as distance or coldness, when in reality, they are a form of clarity. They show people how to treat you. They define what is acceptable and what isn't. And when those boundaries are consistent, they build trust and respect over time. Without self-respect, people test limits. They push, they take, they assume. But when they feel that you won't compromise your values for attention, they begin to approach you differently. With more care, with more awareness, with more intention. And that's when attention shifts, because now it's not about you trying to hold their focus. It's about them trying not to lose yours. Self-respect also removes desperation. You're not trying to be chosen at any cost. You're not afraid of losing someone if it means keeping your peace. And that lack of fear creates strength because it shows that your identity isn't dependent on anyone else's approval. That kind of mindset is powerful. It tells her that you're not easily controlled by emotions or external validation, that you won't bend just to stay relevant, that your life has direction beyond just seeking connection. And instead of pushing her away, it creates a deeper level of attraction rooted in respect. Because at the core of everything, people are drawn to those who value themselves, not in an ego-driven way, but in a grounded, steady way, the kind of self-respect that doesn't need to be announced, it's simply felt. And when that feeling is real, consistent, and unshaken, it doesn't just get attention. It keeps it. There's a truth most people never realize about attraction. It's not built through constant pursuit, endless texting, or trying too hard to impress. In fact, the more you chase, the more you risk losing yourself, and ironically, losing her interest too. But when you step back, when you choose stillness over desperation, something powerful happens inside her mind. She notices. At first, it confuses her. Because she's used to attention, used to being pursued, used to men proving themselves, trying to win her over, trying to stay relevant in her world. But you didn't follow that script. You didn't run after her. You didn't beg for her time. And now her mind starts asking questions she can't ignore. Why isn't he chasing me? And that question, it lingers. Because when you don't chase, you create space. And in that space, her imagination begins to work. She starts replaying your conversations, your energy, your presence. She starts wondering what you're doing, who you're talking to, why you seem so unaffected. And that's when the shift begins. You see, people value what they feel they might lose. And when you're not constantly available, not constantly proving your interest, you become something rare. Not because you're playing games, but because you're grounded, centered, focused on your own life. She feels that. She senses that your world doesn't revolve around her. And instead of pushing her away, it pulls her in. Because deep down, what she truly respects isn't a man who chases, it's a man who chooses. A man who has options but isn't desperate. A man who feels deeply but doesn't lose control. A man who can walk away if his peace is threatened. That kind of energy. It's magnetic. Now her thoughts change. Instead of asking why you're not chasing, she starts wondering how to get your attention. She becomes more aware of how she shows up around you. She notices your reactions, your silence, your presence. And suddenly, without you saying much at all, she's investing emotionally because you gave her something most people never do: space to feel. You didn't overwhelm her with constant validation. You didn't pressure her into something. You let things breathe. And in that breathing room, her feelings had space to grow naturally, not forced, not rushed. And here's the truth most people avoid. When you chase too much, you remove the mystery. When you overgive, you lower your value. When you abandon yourself for someone else, they feel it. But when you stay grounded in who you are, when you protect your time, your energy, your focus, you don't have to chase anything. Because the right energy starts coming to you. And that's exactly what she feels when you don't chase her. Not rejection, not indifference, but something far more powerful: presence without need.